I just wish she would die already. What would you do if one day you overheard someone in your own family say that about you? I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, behind the kitchen door, frozen. My hand still holding a cup of tea, but it felt like my heart had just fallen to the floor. Those words weren't from a stranger. They came from Emily, my daughter-in-law, the woman I once loved like my own child, the one I cooked for, took care of when she was sick, shared dinners and dreams with. All I ever wanted was to grow old in peace, surrounded by the people I love. But just one sentence, cruel and heartless, drifted through the air and shattered every illusion I had about this house. I thought I was a part of the family. I believed that kindness would be returned. That quiet sacrifice from a mother, from a grandmother, would one day be understood. But that night, in the dim yellow light of the hallway, I realized something that pierced deeper than any wound. I wasn't wanted. I wasn't loved. I was a burden. Silence. That was all I had in that moment. No excuses, no outrage, just a suffocating stillness. When trust is broken, not by a slap, but by a whisper. Before we continue this story, I want to ask you, yes, you, take just a few seconds, leave a positive affirmation down below. It could be, I deserve to be loved, or I choose to live a meaningful life. This is your small gift to yourself, and who knows, maybe a beam of light for someone out there quietly hurting. And if this story has touched even the smallest corner of your heart, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Together, we're building a community, a place where stories are not just told, but heard, understood, and healed. My name is Helen Carter. I was born in Milwaukee, into a working-class family. I grew up knowing how to live simply, be kind, and not complain. My parents taught me, a strong woman never complains when she sacrifices for someone she loves. That belief stayed with me all my life. When I married Richard, a gentle carpenter, I felt whole. We weren't wealthy, but we had love. And we had Daniel, our only son, smart, hardworking. He was my entire world. From the moment Daniel was born, I made a vow. No matter what happens, my child will never lack love. And I kept that promise. I was his mother, his friend, his guide. When Richard died in a construction accident, Daniel was only 17. I didn't let myself fall apart. I worked night shifts as a nurse, cleaned school hallways, anything to make sure Daniel could go to college. And Daniel didn't let me down. He got into the University of Washington, then became a software engineer. I still remember the day he bought his first car with his savings. He drove straight home and said, "Mom, you're the first person I'm taking for a ride." We cruised around the city, windows down, wind in my hair. Sitting beside him, I felt like a teenage girl again, heart fluttering just to be next to someone she loves. Then one day, Daniel brought Emily home to meet me. A young woman with long brown hair, bright eyes, and a soft, gentle voice. Emily was an elementary school teacher. She listened well, smiled often, and she quickly won Daniel's heart. I'll admit, from the very first meeting, I felt quietly proud. My son has good taste, I thought. They got married in the garden I had spent 10 years planting, and that day, I gave Emily my mother's silver necklace, a family heirloom. It was my way of saying, from this moment on, you are my daughter too. A few years later, after a bad fall, my health started to decline. Daniel suggested I move in with them. I said no several times, but eventually I agreed. I thought maybe my son needs help with the two little ones, and maybe I need a family near me too. Emily was still kind back then. She said, "Don't worry, Mom, this is your home too." I believed her, trusted her, as if she were my own child, and so I moved into their two-story home in Kirkland. That was where everything began. I became the woman behind the scenes. I cooked, picked the kids up from school, cleaned, did laundry, tucked them in every night. I never asked for anything. I never expected gratitude. I just told myself, this is how I give back to life. I truly believed that my old age would finally be peaceful. I was wrong. At first, everything felt harmonious. Each morning, I brewed coffee, prepared breakfast, and filled the house with the sound of children's laughter. Emily always came down last, gave a polite nod. Thanks, Mum. Daniel, though busy, would hug my shoulders before heading to work. I felt content. I believed I was doing the right thing. I wasn't a burden. I was contributing. I respected boundaries. Never interfered with how they raised their kids. Never imposed my way of life. I just did my part. As a mother, as a grandmother. One time Daniel even joked, "We can go to work peacefully because of you, Mum." That sentence made me feel young again. I started gardening in the backyard. When the first flowers bloomed, Emily smiled and called me the Golden Touch. She once asked me to pick plants that wouldn't trigger the kids' allergies. Everything, from my point of view, seemed perfectly fine. But then, small changes began to creep in, like a cold wind slipping through a door you thought was closed. I started hearing sighs, noticed exchanged glances I couldn't quite understand. A few times, dinner was already made when I got back. Sometimes I came down late, only to see everyone nearly finished eating. Emily would give a quick smile. "Oh, we thought you already ate." I told myself maybe I was being too sensitive. Older people tend to notice things, but slowly, those little things added up. I wasn't told about parent-teacher meetings. I only found out about weekend outings after the family had already returned. One birthday, Daniel brought home a cake, but no candles. We had a quick dinner. Everyone went back to their rooms. I stayed behind, lit a small candle by myself, ate a piece of cake, and quietly told my heart, maybe they're just busy. I didn't blame them. I wasn't angry. I just felt distant, as if day by day, I was fading inside the very home I once called my safe haven. I began speaking less, asking less. I still did everything, but in silence. And that's when I realized silence can make people forget that you're even there. One afternoon, I was folding laundry for the kids when I overheard Emily on the phone upstairs. She didn't know I was nearby. Her voice was tired, frustrated. "I can't take it anymore. She's always hovering, taking up space. This doesn't even feel like my house anymore." I didn't freeze from shock. I froze from pain. A pain so familiar, so deep, so cold. It went straight to my heart. After that day, I stopped trying to find excuses for the coldness in their voices. I began to understand this distance wasn't about being busy. It was intentional. No one asked for my opinion anymore. Not about meals, not about weekend plans, not about anything in the house. I was just someone who existed. One day, while rearranging the bookshelf, I discovered something that hit harder than words. All the family photos with me in them, gone from the walls. The picture of me holding my grandson as a baby, the one that used to hang in the living room, was now shoved into a drawer, buried between old receipts and junk mail. No one said anything. No one explained. And I didn't ask. I don't know the exact moment when I stopped being Daniel's mother and became simply the woman who lives here. But the signs were clear. They wanted me. Gone. Emily started dropping hints. "Mum, have you thought about looking into some senior living centers? They've changed a lot. You'd get professional care, and it's really modern now." She said it with a gentle voice, but her eyes avoided mine. I smiled and replied simply, "I'm fine staying here." A few days later, Daniel handed me a folder. "Mom, just look over this. It's for medical power of attorney. In case anything happens, we'll be able to make decisions for you." I nodded, took the folder, but didn't sign anything. Something in my gut an instinct only those who've experienced deep loss understand, told me something was wrong. That night, I read every page, every line, and my hands trembled. This wasn't just a medical authorization, it was full guardianship transfer. If I signed it, they would have control over everything, my finances, where I lived, even the right to sell the house. Richard left me back in Milwaukee. I put the folder down, my heart pounding like I had just stepped away from a well-disguised trap, wrapped in the cloak of family. I didn't sign it. I said nothing the next day. Instead, I quietly locked the drawer in my desk. I took out my original will and my old journal, and I began to write. Every strange sentence, every cold gesture, not for revenge, but to protect myself. A few days later, I overheard Emily again, this time on the phone. She thought I was outside in the garden. She didn't sign. I can't take it anymore. If she keeps living forever like this, we're never going to get anything. I stood behind the door. No words, no tears, just silence, because I knew this was no longer my home. I didn't tell Daniel what I heard, didn't ask, didn't confront. I was afraid that asking would only bring me more pain, so I stayed quiet. A silence born not from fear, but from dignity. From that day on, I avoided Emily. I stayed in my room more, ate alone, did my gardening only when she wasn't home. I lived like an uninvited guest, trying not to be in the way. But you know what? Sometimes just existing is enough to make people uncomfortable. One evening, while I was reading, Daniel knocked on my door. He sat at the edge of my bed, like he used to when he was a boy. "Mom," he said softly, "I know you're not happy, but Emily, she's under a lot of pressure too. 2 young kids, tight finances. If you could just sign the power of attorney, it would help us manage everything." I looked at him and asked quietly, "Do you really think I won't live long enough to manage my own life?" Daniel didn't answer. He just looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something drift far away, like I was already the past. The next morning, I called Linda, an old friend I used to work with as a nurse. She lived on the south side of the city. When I told her everything, she was silent for a long time, then finally said, "Helen, you need to protect yourself. They're not the children you once cradled. They're adults now, and adults can be cruel." Linda helped me contact a lawyer, Teresa Lee. Teresa had represented many elderly people in unlawful guardianship cases. She came to my house on a Saturday afternoon. I made tea. We sat down. I told her everything, start to finish, and all she said was, "If you sign, nothing will belong to you anymore, not even your right to live in this house." I handed Teresa my original will, my journal, and the folder Daniel gave me. She nodded. "We have enough." A few days later, I received a letter from the court. Daniel and Emily had filed a petition. They were asking for a competency hearing to have me declared mentally unfit to manage my own life. They wanted full guardianship. I read every word of the petition and couldn't believe my son's signature at the bottom. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the cold silence of my room, my hands trembling as I wrote the final line in my journal. They've chosen their path. Now it's time. I choose mine. The next morning, I wore a black dress with lace trim, the one Richard gave me 25 years ago for our anniversary. I stepped out of the house. No goodbyes. No one walked me to the door. But I knew every step I took now was the step of a woman who would no longer be silenced. I arrived at the courthouse on time. A red brick building, old and heavy, with an icy kind of stillness. As I walked through the revolving door, I wasn't just entering a courtroom. I was walking into a new life. Inside the hearing room, Daniel and Emily were already seated. Emily looked at me, not with the eyes of a daughter-in-law, But with the eyes of someone defending her own interests, Daniel couldn't even meet my gaze. I understood. In this battle, he had chosen silence, and silence is also a betrayal. Next to me was Teresa, a small woman with eyes sharp as a blade. She didn't need to raise her voice. She simply opened the folder, presented the evidence, the original will, my journal, a recording of Emily's phone call. It was enough to weigh the room down like lead. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I stood up. My voice trembled, but each word was clear. I'm not crazy, I'm just old. And being old doesn't mean I've lost the right to decide my own life. No one responded. Emily smirked. Daniel stared at the floor. After the hearing, I walked into the hallway. Sunlight spilled onto my face through the frosted windows. Teresa placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You just did something most people never have the courage to do. I nodded, but my heart still ached. Not because I had protected my assets, not because I had defended my rights, but because I had just lost something I could never get back. My faith in my own son. After the hearing, I didn't return to the old house. I packed a few personal belongings, what was left after everything broke apart, and moved into a small apartment in South Seattle. It was a modest place with a little balcony facing the park. And most importantly, no one there called me a burden. I had lost a lot, but what remained was me. On my first day in the new apartment, I sat among unopened boxes, made myself a cup of hot tea, and watched the sunlight pour through the blinds. What I felt wasn't exactly relief. It was freedom. No more cooking for anyone. No more waking up early for someone else. No more cold footsteps in the hallway. No more judging stares. Just me and the silence. I began my healing journey not by forgetting, but by accepting. I started a new notebook, not a diary of pain, but a collection of gratitude. Each day, I wrote down at least 3 things. On the first day, I wrote, I still have a clear enough mind to write. I have a home of my own. I can breathe without asking anyone's permission. I signed up for a meditation class and spent more time at the local library. There, I met other seniors like me, each carrying a story, a scar. But in them, I saw hope. And I asked myself, if they still believe in life, why can't I? I began learning basic laws for the elderly, not to file lawsuits, but to know how to protect myself. The things I once thought were too complicated became tools to help me understand that I still had choices. I also reopened the old sewing machine, a wedding gift from my mother, and I started stitching together pieces of fabric I'd saved for years. I didn't know what I was sewing, maybe a bag, a shirt, or maybe just a way to keep my hands from trembling with memories. I slowly adjusted to my new rhythm. Each morning, I got up early, made chamomile tea, placed it by the window, and listened to the birds. I no longer turned on the TV to fill the silence. Instead, I learned to listen to the silence itself, and in that quiet, I heard my own voice again. Every afternoon, I walked through the park, nodded at other elderly folks, shared a few casual words. One time I helped an old man who had dropped his cane. He told me stories of when he was a Navy sailor. Each person had their tale, their past, and I felt myself reconnecting to the world. I joined a support group for seniors who had been mistreated by their families. We met every Tuesday, sat in a circle, drank coffee, and talked about things no one dared to say at home. There, I didn't have to hide my pain. I saw eyes filled with empathy, not pity, not judgment. One woman, Nora, shared how her daughter forced her to sell her home and moved her into a nursing facility far from the city. She escaped and now lives with a friend. I held her hand tightly because I knew we weren't just sharing stories, we were sharing courage. I also started volunteering at the library, reading stories to children every Friday. Wide-eyed little ones listened as I read fairy tales. They called me Story Grandma Helen. No one there knew I was once the woman someone wished dead. There. I wasn't a ghost from the past. I was a living part of the present. One day, a little girl asked, "Grandma, why do you smile so much?" I replied, "Because I've already cried enough." She didn't understand, but she smiled back. And I knew. I was planting kindness again. I also learned to forgive. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Forgiveness didn't mean letting them back in to hurt me again. It meant unshackling my own heart. I still keep my original will, still have a lawyer ready if needed, but I don't live in fear. I don't let old pain stop me from loving the world. One more time. One afternoon, as I was sewing, I heard children laughing outside. I looked down from the window, a young mother playing with her daughter, and I suddenly thought of Daniel, of the days when he used to run around the yard, waving his little toy airplane in the air. My heart ached, not from regret, but because I had finally learned how to remember, without hurting. Yes, I had been wounded by the very people I once called family, but I refused to let that define me. I am Helen, the woman who walked through pain without turning to stone, the woman who still believes in human kindness. Even after betrayal, I no longer live to be loved. I live to love myself. I never expected to see them again. But life has a strange way of circling back. 1 year after the court hearing, Daniel called me. His voice was hesitant. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know we were wrong." I didn't respond. Some wounds don't need apologies. They need time to heal. Daniel told me that after the trial, Emily began controlling everything. Not just the finances, but his friends, his decisions, his life. He said he lived in a house filled with comfort, but empty of warmth, where every decision needed approval. One day, he came across the journal I'd accidentally left behind. It detailed everything I had seen, heard, felt. He said, "I had no idea you saw it all, heard it all, and stayed silent." I replied gently, "I wanted to preserve your image of your wife, but I was wrong. Silence isn't love, it's self-harm." But that wasn't the end. One afternoon, Teresa, the lawyer from the past, called me. "Helen, are you ready?" she asked. "We can make the announcement about your revised will." I nodded. I had spent the past year rewriting my will, not out of spite, but to protect what truly mattered. My estate, including the house in Milwaukee, savings, and charitable fund, was now divided among those who needed it: the local library, a support group for abused seniors, and a scholarship fund for girls pursuing nursing. And most importantly, I set aside special gifts for those who stood by me in my recovery: Nora, Linda, and Teresa. No one from my former family was named. I also recorded a short video. No blame, no anger. Just a story. My story. A reminder. When you're pushed out of the place you once called home, don't waste your time knocking on that door again. Go find a place that deserves your presence. When that video is released after I pass, I want it to leave something more valuable than money: the truth. News of the will spread faster than I expected. Emily sent me an email, just 4 words. "Do you hate me?" I didn't respond. I don't hate her, but I no longer carry emotional ties either. I've walked through a chapter where family felt like shackles. Now, I only keep the softest memories. Afternoons when Daniel sat studying by the window. The day he ran home, waving his first A grade. The morning I waved him off on the bus to college. The rest, I left to time. One day, I was invited to speak at a conference for senior women. Women who had experienced emotional abuse within their families. I walked to the stage. No paper, no microphone. Just a silent room. I began. I was once a mother who gave up too much, too easily. A woman who believed silence was love, until I learned, if you don't protect yourself, no one else will. When I finished, no one clapped. They stood. They looked at me with something greater than applause, respect. An elderly woman came up and hugged me tightly. She whispered, "I've never dared to speak, but today, because of you, I will." That day, I realized, my greatest victory wasn't keeping my estate. It was reclaiming my voice, reclaiming myself. I began receiving letters from women across the country. One wrote, "I withdrew my guardianship petition for my daughter." Another said, "I moved out. I bought my first painting, for myself." Small acts, but turning points. For those who had long been overlooked. And then something happened I never expected. Emily came to see me, not to apologize, but to say thank you. She sat across from me, thinner, tired. "I'm not here for Daniel. He lives in Portland now. I'm here for myself. You did something I thought only the young could do. You protected yourself." I asked her, "Have you forgiven yourself?" She lowered her head, eyes red. "Not yet, but I'm trying. I started therapy. I started teaching again. I didn't cry. I just nodded. That's enough. Not everyone who hurts you will ever say sorry, but when someone comes back, not for forgiveness, but for healing, you know what you did wasn't in vain." Life, in the end, isn't about who's right or wrong. It's a journey. To rediscover yourself after everything's fallen apart. I didn't return to Daniel or Emily. I don't live in the past, but I don't deny it either. I carry it with me, like a scar. Proof I survived. I still live in that little apartment, now filled with flowers, lavender, white daisies, a small corner for herbs. Each morning I water them, play soft music, breathe deeply. No rushed footsteps, no biting words, only the steady beat of a peaceful heart. I still volunteer at the library. The children know me now. Some run up and hug me, calling me Grandma Helen, a name not bound by blood, but full of love. I even started a YouTube channel, Living Late, Loving Deep. I tell stories, share lessons, revive forgotten dreams. Thousands watch. They message me saying they see themselves in my words. A woman in Ohio wrote, "You saved me from signing papers I didn't understand." An older man in Texas messaged, "Thank you for proving that growing old isn't the end." I never remarried. I don't live with anyone. I chose solitude. Not loneliness, but independence. Sometimes I still think of Richard. I imagine him sitting in his old chair, watching me sew, smiling. "You've become stronger than anyone I ever knew." And I smile back, because I finally learned to love myself, the way I once loved you. Life didn't give me what I wanted, but it gave me the chance to change what I could no longer accept. I forgave Emily, in silence, not to make her feel better, but so I could sleep well. I didn't want to carry bitterness to my grave. Anger is a prison. I chose freedom. I forgave Daniel by letting him go. Maybe one day he'll understand how deeply his mother once loved him, but that's his journey, not my responsibility anymore. I wrote a single line in my new journal. "You don't need revenge. Your peace is the best punishment." And I live by that truth every single day. I've returned to writing letters, a habit nearly forgotten in this digital age. I send them to old friends, to someone I met briefly in the nursing home, to a college student who once interviewed me for her thesis. Each letter holds a memory, but written in light, not shadows. I got a reply from a man named Gerald in Arizona. He wrote, "I read your piece in Seattle Voices. I once forced my wife to sign away her rights when she developed Alzheimer's. When she died, I realized I had stripped her of her dignity. Your story made me weep." I read Gerald's letter on an autumn afternoon. Leaves covered the balcony. I teared up, not from pain, but from connection. Sometimes the pain you thought was yours alone turns out to be shared by a whole community, waiting for someone to say it out loud. I still make videos, but now I invite others to share their stories too. A woman once financially abused by her own family. A man tricked into selling his home by his children. Each story is a message. We are here, we've been hurt, but we didn't break. I hosted my first in-person meetup. More than 50 people came, in wheelchairs, with service dogs, some hand in hand with their children. We shared tea, stories, laughter. No titles, just hearts that had once been forgotten, now finally seen. That day, I said only one thing. We don't need anyone else to validate us. We only need to return to ourselves. That moment meant more than any award I'd ever dreamed of. I am not old to die. I am old to live deeper, gentler, kinder. Every day I write in my journal, today I loved myself a little more. One day, a little boy at the library asked me, "Grandma, aren't you sad to live alone?" I looked him in the eye, smiled. "No, sweetheart, because I'm not alone. I have me." I once feared aging, feared being left behind. But now I know, no one can abandon you if you don't abandon yourself. Dear friend, if you're still here, with me, at this very last moment, it means that somehow, this story touched a part of you, and for that, I am deeply grateful. Let me ask you, have you ever felt like that woman, invisible in your own family? Have you ever felt like your voice didn't matter, like you existed, but weren't truly living? If so, you are not alone. Tell me your story. Leave a comment below. Just one sentence, one positive affirmation, one promise to yourself. It could be, "I deserve to be loved. I am the light of my life," or anything that helps you feel a little stronger. And if this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need to hear it. Not to make this video go viral, but to let someone out there who feels forgotten know that they are not alone. We, those who were once told we were past our prime, are only just beginning to live, not to please others, but to be ourselves, fully and unapologetically. And if you are hurting right now, from betrayal, from grief, or just from life itself, remember, you don't need revenge. Your peace is the best punishment. I believe in you. I believe that you too will write the most beautiful chapter of your life, after everything. And I'll be here, telling healing stories, walking with you, step by step. You might think, but I'm not strong like her. Believe me, Helen wasn't born strong. She cried herself dry. She questioned her purpose. She allowed herself to be mistreated, just to keep the peace. Strength doesn't mean not being afraid. It means standing up, even when your legs are shaking. You don't have to make a huge change today. Sometimes just saying no to what hurts you, or enough to those who don't respect you, is the first step. If you're standing at a fragile crossroads right now, leave a comment. Mark this moment. I choose me. I'm starting over because I deserve to. I am the light of my life. I read every comment, truly. And so do others, because your words might just be the bridge that saves someone else from the edge. And do you know what the most beautiful part is? Even across hundreds or thousands of miles, we can still become a community, a space where age isn't a limitation, where the past doesn't define your future, where everyone has the right to speak, to be heard, to be held. So if this story gave you something, anything, don't hesitate. Drop a like, not because it's perfect, but because you saw yourself in it. Leave a comment, because one true sentence can touch a soul. And subscribe, not to boost a number, but so we don't lose each other on the days you need someone to walk beside you. You're not here by accident. Maybe you stumbled on this video today, but perhaps it was your own inner voice calling you back, to remind you, you are still whole, still worthy, even if the world once made you doubt it.